Hello everyone, this is the second video for the Cold Snap of Power Occultist. If you have missed the first video, make sure to go back and watch that as well, as there will be some useful information in that one. Day 2 was very much Atlas progression. It was completely focused on just getting through tier 16s and getting Ether and Exarch done, picking up my 2 Void Stones, and just getting as much of the Atlas completed as I could. That ended up going okay. Progression was a bit slow, especially in some of the later red maps, as rares were taking a bit of time to kill, especially some of the tanky ones with the Necropolis mods on them nowadays. Bosses were doing okay, not the fastest, but not the slowest either, thankfully. Ether and Exarch took a bit of time. The fights were slow, but doable. I ended up dying twice on Exarch, I think, but that was a complete skill issue on my end. I will completely admit that. I ended up just being really bad at dodging balls and ended up dying. At this point I was also starting to progress my Atlas tree with all the points that I was unlocking. I ended up speccing into Essence early on, followed by a bit of Delve, getting some Harbies up and running, and Harvest. Those are all of my favorite mechanics, they're just really good for crafting up gear. However, two things that I want to talk about there. I'm not a big fan of the Essence rework, that's the first thing. The way that they remade some of the Essence Atlas passives did not really end up meshing well. Also, my build was lacking a good bit of single target damage at this point in time. I think I was sitting at around 1 million single target DPS. That was not great, especially with some tanky essences, with some of the Necropolis mods. Don't want to deal with that again. Ended up speccing out of Essence. And then also Delve, I ended up speccing out of a bit as well. I still have it allocated for the Voltaxic Intoxication node, the one that gives you the movement speed and the damage and the resistance. But Delve itself I ended up kind of leaving, considering that Necropolis is doing sort of a similar thing. Delve is really good at giving you lots of fossils, dense fossils, perfect fossils to get you some high quality bases, and then using dense fossils to craft high ES gear. Von Regalias, Ubra Circlets, Titanium Spirit Shields, things like that. Necropolis kind of does the same thing. With all of the corpses, you can get 30 qual pretty easily on most pieces of gear. You can increase the defense chances, reduce the life chances, get a lot of high tier modifiers going, especially after the buffs that I think came in on day 4 of the league. Necropolis crafting is really, really powerful now, and there's not really much of a need for me at the moment to delve. So I ended up speccing out of both of those nodes and instead just went fully for more Necropolis. I also ended up speccing Maven nodes with Destructive Play, the keystone that gives you more bosses. I ended up going for all of the Guardian maps, Conqueror maps, the Synthesis maps, just to get more Atlas progression, and also, importantly, start farming up a lot of Maven invitations. One of the big things that this build is going to need is Awakened Spell Cascade, I think, later down the line. At least if I want to take down Ubers, that is. And I'm just going to need to do a lot of Maven for that. Speaking of Maven, I ended up fighting Maven at around day 4. At this point I still didn't have many gear upgrades, nothing really noteworthy to talk about, just some basic stuff like a crit multi-amulet. I did find a +1 cold fractured wand that I ended up crafting up, that was pretty nice, but nothing else too much yet, mainly just defenses. And I think I was sitting at around a 1.5 million DPS at this point, nothing really too crazy. And it kind of showed. I had to do quite a few memory games, not the worst amount, but more than I was hoping for, at the very least at this point. In my test runs beforehand, I think I had just a lot better gear at this point, but I just ended up not having an amazing amount of DPS, and the Maven fight took quite a bit of effort to die. I ended up dying twice, I think it was, or 3 times, complete skill issue on my end, so at least it's not a build issue. I was very happy with that one. But yeah, I ended up getting Maven done. I at this point had a few Awakened gems, but I didn't allow myself to use any of them until I got at least 1 Maven kill in. At which point, one of my private league members had found an Awakened added cold damage. I'd also found a few Awakened gems already, thanks to the Destructive Play keystone, but I didn't have an Awakened cold damage yet. So I took that off of his hands, and that honestly made the build already feel a lot smoother. Awakened added cold damage was a lot more damage, and especially once it hits level 5 with the +1 cold gem on it, I would imagine it's going to add even more damage to the whole thing. And progression was getting pretty smooth at this point. By day 3, I started using my second Atlas passive to really start juicing up my maps with Legion and Expedition. Partly because I needed some currency, but mainly because of the fact that the Militant Faith Timeless Jewel, one of the options is the Inner Conviction Keystone, that gives you 3% more spell damage per power charge, and combined with some good rolls on the actual Militant Faith itself, for some of the devotion stuff, you can get some really high damage numbers. I ended up finding a really nice Militant Faith after, I think, 3 entire days of farming. It took me quite a bit, sadly. I ended up needing about 12 rerolls on the Militant Faith before I ended up getting one with Inner Conviction on it. That was a bit painful. But I did get it on an area damage and elemental damage per 10 devotion one, so that's a nice bonus. That's a good chunk of extra damage that I could add into the build that way. And that ended up giving me about 40% more damage. At this point, I went from 2.5 million DPS to 3.5 million DPS with the Timeless Jewel upgrade. And I can tell you, at that point, I broke the barrier where the build starts to feel very comfortable and you start to really feel that there's more to the build. As for where to take the build next, I have a couple of ideas in mind. First of all, I'm going to be spending a lot of time over the next few days just abusing Necropolis as much as I can. It is a really strong league mechanic, the items you can craft with it are really fun, and I just want to create better items. There's also a couple of unique items that I'm keeping my eyes on. I mean, a Void Battery plus a Badge of the Brotherhood is always an option, always a good option for any power charge stacking build, right? There is the option of a Vertex combined with a Divine Blessing and Inspiration to allow you to get basically a Divine Blessing for free. And I would use Hatred with that. Getting an extra Hatred into this build would add just straight up another 1 million to the damage of this build as well in its current state. That would be a major upgrade. There's a couple of other items that I'm thinking of getting as well, but since I'm in a private league, it kind of depends on what I can find and what drops, right? And just for a quick gear update, this is day 5 of the league. A pretty nice wand with a +1 cold spell, gem fracture, some cast speed, some crit. Crit chance for spells is really important on this build because you need to get close to 100% crit so that you can constantly generate your power charges, so you can keep casting. But other than that, a basic wand, a shield with crit and ES. It has double damage while focus, very important, combined with the gloves giving you a lot of damage uptime during your focus window. You get a lot of cast speed, double damage, very powerful. So far with the Graves, I have made this Mind Cage with 375 ES and a whole bunch of resistances, and then a 700 ES Val Regalia with a whole bunch of resistances. Eventually, I plan for both of these to remake them with an open prefix so I can craft the Fizz as elemental damage, Fizz as fire for a helmet, and Fizz as fire and lightning for the chest piece, with Corel and Gravicius respectively. I also still need to change the implicits on this to Grace Effect and Crit Multi, but we'll get to that. The amulet is just a Crit Multi amulet. I would really prefer to have a +1 cold and a Crit Multi amulet, but that's a project for the future. I'm not too worried about it for now. I'm relatively happy with this one. The rings are okay, they're just kind of there to fill out attributes, resistances, a bit of mana problems as well. Getting mana regen on this ring combined with some mana minus mana cost really helps. Same thing here. I do actually need to craft that back on. Cast speed, LE damage, also really nice stats to have, just to get a bit more damage from your accessories is always a good option. The belt, very simple, ES resists. I plan on moving the strength from this ruby ring over to here. Considering my chest piece and my helmet, I have an insane amount of resistances now. If I take a look at it, I am more than overcapped and really need to dump some of these stats lower. So probably move some of that ring stuff over to a belt and then craft another damage ring with an opal ring with cast speed, maybe like a cold essence, something like that. And then finally the boots, giving me some suppress, shock immune, always nice. I like crafting these with essences of torment to give me shock immune, and then using the implicits to get even more avoid shock, allowing you to get 100% avoid shock from just the boots. It's kind of a nice solution, and honestly available pretty early on for most people, so a nice solution to get that sorted out. As for the passive tree, not much has changed. Still have the Militant Faith, Inner Conviction is over there, the rest of the passive tree really hasn't changed much. I'm mainly just waiting to get the 8 passive gold cluster so that I can then probably remove the starting area here, take a disorienting display with jewel sockets and fill out the damage there. But until I find that jewel and roll it properly, I'm kind of just going with a tree like this, I think, so. Speaking of rings, there's still the matter of the Profane Proxy and Summon Skitterbots versus the Blasphemy and Feeble. Blasphemy and Feeble is cheaper to run than Summon Skitterbots, because if I'm gonna run Skitterbots, I will link it together to Bone Chill. However, Blasphemy does have the minus 25% effect of curses on it, which is not helpful. I would really like my Enfeeble to be as strong as it possibly can get, so I am very tempted to figure out the mana reservation situation and go from there. And then for the final upgrade that I want to discuss for now is a funny little thing. I'd mentioned before that I'd been running a lot of Harbinger on my mat device, and it's one of my favorite League mechanics actually. And today that finally paid off, as I was running a lot of Harbingers together with a lot of the Scarabs that people have been giving me in the private league, and I finally hit the one where all of the currency is converted to one type of shard, combined with it converting to fracturing shards. It ended up giving me about 2 fracturing orbs worth of shards, and I decided to test my luck further. There was an idea at the back of my head that I wasn't really sure if I would be able to pull off, but I wanted to see if I could get my hands on some Alva Gloves. So with the fracturing orbs finally obtained, I decided, you know what, I still have one of these memories that allows me to get the reverse incursions from the Alva temples, where the bosses come outside and you can kill them and they drop a lot of Alva Gloves and Alva temple mods. And that I did. I went in, and in the very first map, I think on the very first Alva that I clicked, I found a pair of Murder Mitts, a pair of Energy Shield Evasion gloves with the mods that I need. And if you're unaware, these gloves had critical chance strike versus shocked enemies. However, because they are also resistant, you can use Harvest to swap them out. So after getting a bit of crafting done on them and getting them down to 4 mods, I decided to just slam it with a fracturing orb and hope that it fractures. And that it did. We hit the fracture, so these are currently sitting in my stash, and I'm now going to be sitting here over the next few days, probably trying to craft these into a really nice pair of gloves. I still want to keep the cast speed while focused mod, of course, which is also a suffix. And then for the last suffix, I'm thinking of trying to get a 14% suppress on there as well. However, that will take me quite a bit of time and probably just a whole bunch of harvest rerolling and other things just to add random rolls to try and get the 14% suppress. Overall, I'm very happy with how the build is performing. I won't say it hasn't been a bit tough. There were definitely moments on stream over the past couple of days where I was mauling a bit at the lack of damage and wishing that it just did more. But I feel like I finally cleared the crest of the pain, I should say, where hopefully things from now on will just start progressing a lot easier. The damage upgrades will become more meaningful, and at this point the damage is already starting to feel pretty good against bosses. So hopefully it'll be enough to carry us into the late game so that I can maybe, just maybe, take down one Uber this league. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and until the next one, peace.